The 2022 NFL draft class is 3 years into their careers, and in today's video we will be going back and grading the back half of the first round of the 2022 draft, which of course is picks 17 through 32. For anyone interested, we graded picks 1 through 16 last week, and that video will be linked at the end. Not every draft class is the same, as some are more top-loaded than others, and I think you'll see that in today's video. We will be going in reverse order, so we will be starting with the Minnesota Vikings selection of safety Cine, and finishing with the Chargers selection of guard Zion Johnson. And there's 16 picks to dive into, so without further ado, let's begin. The Minnesota Vikings traded back from pick 12 with the division rival Lions and drafted Georgia safety Cine with their first round pick. Unfortunately, Cine broke his leg during his rookie season in just week 4 in a special teams play, and his season was over. Injuries are unfortunately a part of football, and everyone was hoping he could be a starter in 2023 and forget what happened during his rookie season. But that never happened, and pretty quickly Cine became forgotten about, and he became a complete whiff of a first round pick. He played 10 total defensive snaps for the Vikings before being released in final cuts during the 2024 preseason, and since has played for the Bills and Eagles. He finished his Vikings tenure with 1 total tackle, and I don't think this is an exaggeration to say this is pretty close to an all-time draft bust. Not surprisingly, this is an F grade. Dax Hill of the Bengals is up, and when this pick was made, it was supposed to be a developmental pick with the intentions to eventually replace Jessie Bates. Unfortunately for the Bengals, Jessie Bates is one of the best safeties in the league and was immediately named a second-team All-Pro in his first year with the Falcons in 2023, and had another 4 interceptions in 2024, and has been one of the very few bright spots for the Falcons defense over the past few years. In a lot of ways, this pick reminds me of the A.J. Brown Treylon Burks selection, which we'll get to later in the video, where the Bengals thought it would be a seamless transition to replace a great player. Obviously, this selection isn't talked about as much, but the concept applies. Unfortunately, Dax Hill tore his ACL in week 5 of the 2024 season, and he played sparingly in his rookie year back in 2022, so we only have about a year and a quarter worth of football from Dax Hill since being a first-round pick 3 years ago. He made the transition from safety to corner from 23 to 24, and I thought he looked good when he was on the field in 2024. I think this is one of the most difficult picks to grade from this draft because a lot of Hill's situation has been out of his control. I do think the talent is probably close to a B or B+ level based on what we've seen, but I don't think the organization did him any favors from the start. This grade gets a C-. George Karlaftis of the Chiefs is up, and I like this selection when it was made because of what it would represent for George. This applies anytime a player is selected to a team with a Chris Jones, or really anytime there is already a premier defensive lineman or edge rusher on the team, but the reality is for George is he was never going to be the main focus of the opposing offensive line, and that favors him in a lot of situations by having a teammate like Chris Jones, and in 3 years, Karlaftis has 24.5 sacks and has been a really key contributor for the Chiefs. He had a 3-sack game this past postseason against the Texans, and believe it or not, has 8 sacks in 10 career postseason games just 3 years into his career. He has back-to-back seasons with 60 or more pressures, and he was drafted at just 21 years old, so believe it or not, Karlaftis is still younger than some 2025 NFL draft prospects. I don't think he is a premier edge rusher by any means, and I think Chiefs fans would agree with that, but he has 1 double-digit sack season and has continuously been a key contributor in January. I think he will receive a contract extension from the Chiefs when the time comes, and after an A grade last year, he gets another A grade this year. Cole Strange was the Patriots' first-round pick, and I didn't like this pick from the minute it was made for a few reasons. I didn't like the process for the Patriots, who had the 21st pick and traded out of this pick so the Chiefs could get a consensus top 15 player in the draft in Trent McDuffie, while New England traded back to draft a player who was widely viewed as a third-round pick. Rams coach Sean McVay laughed at the selection and basically said he was a guy they were looking at because he thought he would be available late on day 2 when they were on the clock. As cliche as it sounds, the selection of Cole Strange was a very strange selection, and unfortunately he has only played in 13 games over the last 2 years. The best ability in the NFL is, of course, availability, and even when he plays, it's not like he is a game-changing guard that other teams fear when he's on the field. I do think he'll stick around the league for some time, but this pick received a lot of rightful criticism at the time, and through 3 years, the criticism has proven to be warranted. The Patriots have been a bad team over the last couple of seasons, and it's because of decisions like this. 3 years later, this is an F. Devonte Wyatt was the Packers' second first-round pick of the night, with the other being linebacker Quay Walker, and this was an all-around frustrating draft process for the Packers because they desperately needed a receiver entering the 2022 draft, yet used both of their first-round picks on defensive players. Devonte Wyatt was also an older prospect as he was 24 during his rookie season, and anytime you have an older prospect, you expect to see production pretty early because a lot of the time, though not every time, they are more physically developed and mature for that matter too. Wyatt didn't play much during his rookie year, but stepped up in his second year as he had over 40 pressures from the interior, before having a bit of a regression in 2024 as he finished the year with just 23 total tackles in 14 games. Now, you can look at him as having 5 sacks in year 3 through rose-colored lenses, but I don't think that would justify this pick. He has just 5 starts in 3 years, and I thought he was trending in the right direction entering 2024, but did not take the next step. He also missed some time in 2024, and this is a player who has played more than 400 snaps in a season just once in 3 years. He will be 27 during the 2025 season, and 3 years later, this is a C. Jags linebacker Devin Lloyd is up, and the Jags traded up to get Lloyd through a trade with the Bucs. Lloyd has over 110 tackles in each of the first 3 years of his career, and overall there's been a lot more good than bad. I really think Lloyd has improved over the last 2 years of his career, and it's shown. The one big knock with him that Jags fans get frustrated with is he gets beat in coverage at times, and at times it can be pretty bad on tape, but he also does a lot of things right. He's a really good run-stopping linebacker, he can get after the quarterback when they need him to, and I don't think he gets as much credit as he should. I think he is an above-average linebacker and gets far too criticized at times for what can be a near-impossible job, which of course is coverage as an NFL linebacker. There's also times where the Jags certainly don't do him any favors, and it also shows on tape. I know the coverage woes can be pretty frustrating, but I like him, and I think this was a pretty good draft pick, and 3 years later, this is a B+. Jermaine Johnson was the Jets' third first-round pick of the night, as Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson were each selected in the top 10 of the 2022 draft. Johnson was a part of an insane draft for the Jets, in which they also selected running back Breece Hall early in the second round. The plan was to bring Jermaine along slowly in his rookie year and have him be a rotational guy early on, and have him eventually be a starter and a guy who can legitimately get after the quarterback in year 2 and beyond. Credit to the Jets, because that was exactly what they did. He became a Pro Bowler in 2023 as he had over 50 pressures, had 16 quarterback hits, and had 7.5 sacks. Unfortunately, Johnson suffered a torn Achilles in week 2 of the 2024 season and missed the rest of the year. Admittedly, this is a pretty tricky pick to grade because year 1 was kind of a wash and year 2 was a really good year, and ultimately a glimpse of the player I think Jermaine Johnson will be if he can stay healthy. But we are 3 years in with a former first-round pass rusher that has played just 33 career games and has 10 career sacks. I have praised the Jets' 2022 draft countless times, and Jermaine certainly plays a part within that. From a sheer talent level, I really think Jermaine is an A-level talent, and when healthy is everything the Jets could have hoped for when they were on the clock. But because of the lack of production, at least to the level you'd like, a lot of which is out of Jermaine's control, we are going to give this a B grade. Tyler Linderbaum was the Ravens' second first-round pick of the night, as the other was safety Kyle Hamilton, and I really do think the 2022 first round is a good summarization of the Ravens as a franchise. They traded former receiver Hollywood Brown and drafted an All-Pro in Kyle Hamilton, and they traded back a few spots with Buffalo later in the first round, and drafted a multiple-time Pro Bowler to man their trenches for a long time. Tyler Linderbaum was regarded as one of the best players throughout the draft process, but fell down the board due to his positional value. And 3 years later, there are a lot of teams that wish they would have just stayed put and took what was a non-sexy pick in the first round and called it a day. Whenever you think of the Baltimore Ravens, you probably think of Lamar Jackson or even Derrick Henry, but there's no doubt Linderbaum makes Lamar's job easier, and he is an extremely pivotal player to their success. He has not allowed a sack since his rookie season, which is now over 1,100 pass blocking snaps per PFF, and given that he did that at just 23 and 24 years old, I think he's more than here to stay. There's a reason they say to draft Iowa offensive linemen, and he and Bucs tackle Tristan Wirfs are shining examples. This was a tremendous draft process by a really well-run organization, and this is an A+. Tyler Smith was a player I liked a lot in the pre-draft process, as I thought his game would translate very favorably to the NFL level, and I thought whichever team drafted him would be getting a good football player, whether it was at guard or tackle. He's a really explosive athlete for his size, and 3 years in, he's already a multiple-time Pro Bowler and was a second-team All-Pro in 2023. I know people like to mock the Cowboys and get their jokes in about the NFC Championship game streak and all of that, but believe it or not, they do a lot of things well as a franchise. And having a 3-year run of first-round picks in Kaiir Elam, Micah Parsons, and Tyler Smith is a good example of that. And when push comes to shove, they should extend all three players because all three are very good at what they do, and they've already extended Kaiir Elam, of course. I personally don't think Tyler Smith will ever be in the conversation for best guard in football, but he's an invaluable player to the Cowboys, and 3 years later, this is an A+. Bills corner Kaiir Elam is up, and I know this pick is tough to look back on for Bills fans, specifically because their buddies in Kansas City took Trent McDuffie just 2 picks prior to taking Elam, and Trent, of course, would become a multiple-time All-Pro. Kaiir Elam, on the other hand, has been a healthy scratch multiple times, and he became more of a special teams player this past year. He played significant time in the final few games defensively due to injuries ahead of him on the depth chart, and as a third-year player that's a former first-round pick, that's what you need to know about this selection. Now, I know you may be thinking this is an automatic F grade, and I would understand why, as Kaiir has been a healthy scratch and has only played in 29 career games, but Elam had an interception against the Dolphins in the playoffs in 2022, when Buffalo was losing, that gave them the ball on Miami's 33-yard line, and they took the lead in the second half of the game. He also had an interception in the 2023 playoffs when the Steelers were in the red zone, and 2 playoff interceptions in games Buffalo, and especially a game-changing interception in 2022, is more than nothing. And this doesn't change the grade to a B or anything crazy, but I did at least want to note that. And because of the playoff contributions, we are going to bump this to a D. Quay Walker was the first of 2 Packers' first-round picks, as this was the offseason they traded Devonte Adams to the Raiders. Quay has racked up a lot of tackles since becoming a Packer, as he's had over 100 tackles in each of the first 3 years of his career, despite missing a few games in each of the last 2 years, but that doesn't mean he's particularly great. Quay tested pretty well during the pre-draft process, as he had a 4.52 40, which was in the 90th percentile for the linebacker position, and also tested in the 78th percentile in the broad jump. He's a really good athlete at nearly 6'4", 240, but that doesn't always translate to being a good linebacker. And with the pre-draft process going on for the 2025 draft right now, I don't think 40 times mean that much for linebackers, and I think Quay is a good example why. There's thresholds, of course, but a lot of the time it's about instincts, and I don't think Quay reads the game particularly well, and I know Packers fans get pretty frustrated with Walker at times too. The flashes are certainly there, and there's times where Quay will go a few games in a row where he looks like a pretty good player, but he's not consistent, and I think this is who he is as a player 3 years into his career, a C grade. The Kansas City Chiefs traded up to pick 21 to get Washington corner Trent McDuffie, who surprisingly fell down the board. I thought McDuffie was a consensus top 15 player, and I think the Chiefs trading up to go get McDuffie and the Patriots trading back so they could draft a third-round guard at pick 29 perfectly describes the direction each franchise has taken over the past few years. McDuffie is a 2-time All-Pro and is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and as crazy as this is going to sound, experienced the first playoff loss of his career in February of 2025. The Chiefs had 2 first-round picks in 2022, and they hit on each of them in George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. The Chiefs' success over the past few years has not happened by accident, and it's due in large part to extremely successful drafting in back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022. We have talked about not overthinking the good players in draft classes before, and this certainly applied to McDuffie in 2022. Now, I'd be lying if I said I thought he would be a 2-time All-Pro in the first 3 years of his career, but he played a tremendous part in the Chiefs winning back-to-back Super Bowls in 2022 and 2023. His most iconic play at this point is probably the deflection in Super Bowl 58 in a win over the 49ers, and 3 years later, this is an A+. Super Bowl champion quarterback Kenny Pickett is up, and he was the Steelers' first-round pick in hopes he could be the successor to Ben Roethlisberger. The hope was Kenny would go from leading the Pitt Panthers to a wildly successful 2021 season to bringing the Steelers back to being legitimate postseason contenders year in and year out, and that the Steelers' 2022 draft class, led by Pickett and second-round receiver George Pickens, would be a great quarterback and receiver duo for the next several years. And you can even add in Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth too from the 2021 2021 class. I didn't think Pickett's rookie season was all that bad, as his offensive line wasn't great, and he led multiple game-winning drives, and I thought once there was some stability that he would be alright in 2023. I like Kenny heading into the 23 season because the flashes were there, but the consistency was never there, and that's ultimately what came back and bit Kenny in the rear end. He would make a good play and follow it up with misreading plays or receivers not being open or flat-out bad decisions. He finished his Steelers' tenure with 13 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, before being traded to the Eagles last offseason. The Steelers spent a first-round pick on a quarterback that did not work out, and this pick is an F. Trevor Penning is up, and this was a pick I did not like from the beginning, due in large part to the process of this selection. The Saints determined they had to have a second first-round pick in 2022, and to make a long story short, this is how the Eagles acquire Jalen Carter in the 2023 draft. They had the long-term vision to be patient with the process, and the results for each franchise speak for themselves. Penning suffered a torn ligament in his foot before his rookie season began, which limited his time in his rookie year, and was benched in 2023 nearly midway through the year. With veteran Ryan Ramczyk out for 2024 and the Saints spending their 2024 first-round pick on Talisi Fuaga, Penning got his chance to start at right tackle this past year, and it was bad. He allowed over 50 pressures, had 13 penalties, and was a net negative for a team selecting inside the top 10 of the 2025 draft. I was hoping Trevor Penning would prove me wrong, as I also wasn't the biggest fan of him as a prospect, and much preferred Tulsa's Tyler Smith, who eventually went to Dallas, but this pick was bad from the start. The process was bad. He unfortunately sustained an injury which limited most of his rookie year. He was benched in his second year, and he did not play good in his third year. And here we are 3 years later, and this pick is an F. The Tennessee Titans traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles for the 18th pick in the first round, as well as a third-round pick too. Ironically, Treylon Burks' pro comparison throughout the draft process was A.J. Brown, and after seeing the Vikings trade Stephon Diggs, then draft Justin Jefferson, Tennessee quickly found out it's a lot easier said than done in terms of replacing an all-pro caliber talent. In 3 years, Treylon Burks has just 699 career receiving yards, a mark A.J. Brown had hit for the Eagles by Week 9 of the 2022 season. It's unfortunate this pick didn't work out because the opportunity was more than there for Treylon, as the Titans receiving room hasn't exactly been good over the past few years. Burks was the 6th receiver taken in the first round of the 2022 draft, and unfortunately was the least productive of the 6, and it's even more embarrassing for the Titans that A.J. Brown has been such a good player for the Birds since this trade was made. And since this trade was made, A.J. Brown has 2 Super Bowl appearances to Treylon Burks' 1 career touchdown. And as you can probably guess, this pick is an F. Zion Johnson was the Chargers' first-round pick back in 2022, and Zion was an incredible athlete coming out of Boston College. He tested in the 88th percentile or better in the vertical jump, broad jump, 3-cone drill, short shuttle, and the bench press. He also had 34-inch arms, which is a positive, and was a really clean prospect. He's had a lot of ups and downs as an NFL player, and I think the best way to describe Zion Johnson as an NFL player is consistently inconsistent. I really think he's the type of player where he'll have a few good games, and you'll hype him up to your friends about him being a good player, and then he has a really bad game or an incredibly bad rep that everyone sees, and that's kind of how the first 3 years have played out. In terms of actual talent, I do think Zion Johnson is pretty easily in the upper half of the league when he's at his best, but he's not consistent at all, and he's allowed 33 or more pressures in every year since being drafted, and has been an incredibly up and down player. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he put it all together one year and eventually made a Pro Bowl, because the flashes are there, but the consistency is not, and 3 years later, this is a C. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 46% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.